I'm Cindy Jones.
And I'm Haley Taylor, and we are the founders of a company called Bi-Tapp.
We have created a wearable device that does the bilateral tapping for you, regulating your nervous system in real time, creating a steady state of calm and focus. People of all ages are using the tappers.
We are excited to have people share their stories about how the tappers are benefiting them and their families.
Today, I have the opportunity to visit with Dr. Sara Gilman. Haley, would you like to introduce her?
I would love to. Dr. Sara Gilman, psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist, brings over 38 years of experience to her work in helping individuals achieve their maximum potential. Her expertise spans across various areas, including business performance, sports performance, and life performance. As a licensed marriage and family therapist with a doctorate degree in clinical psychology and certification in sports psychology, Dr. Gilman is dedicated to expanding human potential in mind, body, and spirit through clinical excellence, integrity, and compassion. Formerly the co-founder and CEO of Coherence Associates, a professional counseling corporation in San Diego, California, Dr. Gilman has received certifications in EMDR therapy, brain spotting, disaster mental health, psychological first aid, hypnotherapy, and heart math. She was also awarded fellowship status with the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress for her work with emergency responders. She served the EMDR therapy community as a past president of the EMDR International Association Board of Directors. Additionally, Dr. Gilman has completed her fellowship certification at the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, specializing in psychedelic assisted therapy. Specializing in peak performance, mental toughness, and resilience for business professionals, athletes, artists, and first responders, Dr. Gilman has worked with a wide range of individuals, including Olympic athletes, elite triathletes, gymnasts, ice skaters, equestrians, cyclists, opera singers, Navy SEALs, SWAT officers, and more. She provides training for fellow therapists on how to effectively work with optimal performers. Due to her extensive experience and compassionate spirit, Dr. Gilman is a trusted and sought-out professional counselor, author, speaker, and mentor, and a very good friend to Bi-Tapp.
I'm excited to have the opportunity to visit with her. With someone with this wealth of experience, we're going to learn a lot about how she's using the tappers with the different groups of people that she specializes with. With your extensive work with performers and elite athletes and people that are in really high pressure jobs and they have to be on point, how have you introduced the tappers to them and how are they using them?
Mm-hmm. When I work with performers of all kinds, maybe start today and talk about athletes in particular. You know, I've worked with everything from Olympians to elite triathletes, swimmers, cyclists, gymnasts, and everything from post-injury and they're having some hiccups or yips or slumps when they're getting back into their training, or the stress that arises pre-competition.
Sure.
You know, or when the scouts are there, you know, and they're being watched at another level. And so really it's been nearly every sport you can think of. And when I introduce self-regulation, because they all come in with anxiety, right?
Right.
And they're coming in because they're afraid of something, either getting injured again or losing their position, or which might mean losing their sponsorship, which might mean losing their career.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. Or, you know, gymnasts who are doing extraordinary things. And if they hesitate, they're going to get injured badly. So I introduce self-regulation first. I talk about anxiety first. And I try to normalize that this is just our body's, our nervous system's response to fear and to pushing the limits and going to that next level of peak performance and pushing and pushing. And so I find out first, what do they do now to help them, what I call down regulate?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just gently introduce bilateral tapping. I say, you know, when you activate both hemispheres of the brain, you get out of that fight or flight mechanism in the base of the brain. Because when you're in the base of the brain in fight or flight, you can't think as clearly.
Right.
It takes a lot more of your internal energy to push over that anxiety and let your training kick in. So I introduce Bi-Tapps as an example.
Mhm.
And I just demystify it. I normalize it. I said, well, you could either sit there and do this, tap, 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 or you could put, as you can see, I have them on now. That was on purpose for me, not for this podcast.
Mine are on too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why, Cindy, do we put these on? Because what we know now and what my performers know pretty quickly is that it's a passive way that you can put this on, the tapping happens, and it's actually a comfortable, what do you call it, buzz, and it's in the background. And I know for me, I'll put them on before something or while I'm trying to do some paperwork. And, with my little ADHD, I could just pretty 90 seconds and I feel this, just this down regulating automatically. Our system wants to do that because it's a better use of our energy. So with the performers, when I do this in a meeting, in a session, I'm not targeting anything. I'm not, I'm an EMDR therapist of 30 years. I'm not trying to process trauma.
Right.
We're just having a conversation. And what I know is when they have these on for a couple minutes, I watch their shoulders drop. I watch them spontaneously take what I call an organic deep breath. It's just as much as the body needs. And then they'll keep telling me some stuff. And then I'll say, hey, did you happen to notice this? What are you noticing right now? And without exception, they'll say, I feel clearer. I feel like I'm sitting in the seat a little bit more. And I said, well, I noticed that you took a spontaneous breath and your shoulders dropped. And boy, as a therapist and as a peak performance coach, I don't go anywhere without them.
Right.
And almost everybody I work with, I say, please, I want you to get these and I'll tell you why. The other thing with performers is they've got these intense schedules and they're burning it at both ends. Many times these are student athletes, so they've got their academics that they're dealing with as well. And so I talk with them, and what I love about working with performers is they're coachable. They'll follow the coaching, right? And there's no good reason for them to resist. They want to get better, and so they'll do whatever it takes. And when they put the Bi-Tapps on, I say an hour before bed, okay? As you're going to your training session, okay? On the way home from a training session. So anytime there's a transition, I say just toss them on whether you think you need them or not, because it just helps the system ground itself naturally. And without exception, I can teach it. As soon as they do it, they're in, right? It's kind of like what you and I said, we've got them on and we don't have to be like feeling completely stressed out, right? We just put them on and there's a grounding, calming, and a clarity that happens pretty quickly. So I will also use them with performers when they're visualizing an upcoming performance, competition, or even that feeling that they get when, like baseball players, when they know the scouts are going to be there, this anticipatory anxiety.
Yes.
I don't want them walking on the field with that. And if they can just put the Bi-Tapps on ahead of time, and we do what we like to call in EMDR therapy, a future pace. I want you to think about, visualize, and put yourself in this future event. And the scouts are watching, or the stands are full, or the audience is listening, whatever it is. And we do that with the Bi-Tapps on, so they're in this state of grounded focus. It's not really a meditation. It's not like that. It's not calm, close your eyes necessarily. But they can walk through in their mind's eye and visualize them being in that moment. But when they do it with the Bi-Tapps on, that's what I call rehearsal. And they're rehearsing in that grounded state. So what's the saying in sports and music and art? That we perform the way we practice. We perform the way we rehearse. So you want to rehearse and practice and train in this grounded, self-regulated state, because your system's going to kick into that when you're actually out there. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I feel like there's this window and they want to perform at this optimal level. And then if it goes a little bit too high, they won't be able to perform at the level they've prepared. And so
Right.
that's what we're trying to regulate. And so like right in the moment, if they weren't able to use tappers, then I just teach people, then just wiggle your feet back and forth, just make
Right.
sure you're moving
Right.
a little. And but I
Right.
love how you're using the tappers in preparation, because then I think that gets them better prepared for their performance. I think that's actually incredible. And then probably some people, maybe some performers, not all, of course, depending on the sport or the event, could even use the tappers during the event. Like if they were a musician, I think they could, if they had anxiety. So I know that I've worked with some
Right.
people and they're using it during to just keep that at bay if they're really having a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had baseball players put them in their socks. I've had, cyclists and equestrians get in what I like to call the zone or the flow,
Yes.
and the
Yep.
Bi-Tapps help so much.
Mm-hmm.
And with their horses, they're standing, and I ask them to put their hand on their horse's flank where the heart is. And they will start to get into that, we like to call it coherence or the flow
Yes.
or the zone state
Right.
with the horse.
Mm.
And you know what? Well, I watch it. I've done this so many times, and even the horse goes
Wow.
with the rider. And so what happens is they are now in sync.
Beautiful.
And when we're training and working on some things, they have their Bi-Tapps on while they're training.
That's really incredible. Well, with I also know another way that you've used the tappers is in regards to pain management. And I was just wondering if you could just share some examples or your knowledge about that, your experience.
Well, in the office, I've had people come in with chronic pain disorders, back, things like that, or even the exhaustion of autoimmune disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're talking about that, you can just see the stress level, which in my mind, I think cortisol, adrenaline is now getting pumped in the system, which makes everything worse.
Sure.
And so I invite them to put the Bi-Tapps on, and then this regulation starts to happen. Now, I have a wild example, and when something happens personally, it is embedded. It's in your system.
Mm-hmm.
Some time ago, my husband had a significant foot reconstruction, and it wasn't just a little foot surgery; it was a total rebuild.
Wow.
And we were sent home from the hospital, and I was prepared. I had my pad. I was going to write down, everything, all the meds and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sent home with a medication IV that was supposed to last 72 hours. And it didn't. And the first night, we got home late afternoon, that first night, all of a sudden, and he was medicated. We were following all the instructions. He started shaking and sweating, and the pain was extraordinary. And, now it's, 11 o'clock at night. I'm trying to call the medical group, and I've given him everything we were allowed to give him. And then all of a sudden I went, honey, can I put the Bi-Tapps on you? And he's like, and he's trying to breathe. He goes, anything. And I mean, it was 10 plus, and there was nothing that was letting it up, and he couldn't get up. Right. So, I put the Bi-Tapps on, and it wasn't 2 minutes. I got to say, it happened. He took this big, deep breath.
Yeah.
And I had him going a little faster than I normally would for just somebody who's not really amped up. But he was so amped up. So I had him going a little bit faster. And within a couple of minutes, I saw him literally, his whole body start to ratchet down, and then he could breathe, and then he could manage the pain. So what happened was, in my mind, I'm not an MD doctor, I'm a psychology doctor, right?
Right.
In my mind, what was so evident, first of all, I was totally relieved.
Sure.
And while we were waiting for the doctors, and what else can we do? Well, it turns out this pump they sent home, it broke. It didn't work.
No wonder.
And that was the problem. He wasn't keeping up with a level of pain medication post-op that he needed to. So I kept the Bi-Tapps on him, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I hope the charge holds. I hope the charge holds. And it held, and it held, and it held. And I kept clicking it to make sure we start another round again. And what happened was, I believe because when you're in that level of pain, you get into that amygdala, that fight or flight. The
Yes.
vagus nerve is, the sympathetic system is all ramped up.
It's just all
And
activated.
nothing you're doing can deactivate that because it feels life-threatening. And once you're at that level, that's really hard to bring that down. The Bi-Tapp did it for him.
Good.
And when that started ratcheting him down, then he could breathe, and then in less than 5 minutes, he fell asleep.
Ah.
I was standing there going, because he was so exhausted, from all the pain.
Yes.
But he would have never been able to sleep had I not done that. I mean, I'm convinced. So that was, I think I called you and said, oh my gosh.
That's a beautiful story.
This is a miracle.
Yes.
This is a miracle.
Because I do believe in other coping skills. I just believe, like you said, if it gets, I would say 0 to 10, 6 to 10, it just gets hard to grab those other coping skills. And so for him to have a resource just do it for him is what the game changer is. And then, like you said, then as he calmed down, then he could take a deep breath, which is also very good. And
I think the mechanism with the Bi-Tapps is distracting the amygdala. And so then, you can get into the parasympathetic system, the calming system can start getting activated again. When you're locked in and that gear is stuck in that fight, flight, freeze mechanism, and pain is off the charts, it's very difficult. And anyway, so that was a very compelling, and now with all my clients, if they're pre-surgery, post-surgery, I said, listen, healing is about energy efficiency. Your body needs the energy to focus it all on healing. And so if your energy is managing pain, then it's not going towards the healing. That's really good, Sarah. Yeah, we have Bi-Tapps everywhere. And all my clients, I mean, it's a no-brainer to wear them constantly. The other, when you're post-op and that kind of thing. The other thing, and again, this is a family thing, and it means such that of course I bring it into the office, that my oldest son headed off to law school, and the Bi-Tapp sat on his kitchen counter for a long time. And I said, listen, this before he went to law school, if you're not going to use them, I'm taking them back. Right. Because, they're used to their mother bringing home the, next greatest technology or whatever. Yeah. Right. Well, not really technology, but because I'm not a techno nerd at all, which is another super great thing about Bi-Tapps, because I can manage them and they're really easy. But anyway, I told him, I said, listen, no big deal. If you're not going to use them, I'm going to take them back. Sure. And so he goes, no, I'm going to do it. And that was a year before he headed to law school. When we Zoom as a family, I see him every time with his Bi-Tapps on. Wow. And at first I thought, oh, is everything okay? As a mother. Right. And I said, hey, I've been noticing the last couple of times we've talked, you've had the Bi-Tapps on it. Is everything okay? And he goes, are you kidding me? I use these every day. Wonderful. And I said, you do? He goes, yeah, because it helps me stay focused. And law school is so intense. The beast. And and he says, at the end of the day, I think I just have better energy. I'm still exhausted, but I've been able to focus and concentrate without so much of the struggle. That's really a great story. I think of it as he's got his whole brain working, that we all do. And again, that anxious fight or flight, it's just doesn't get a lot of traction when your both hemispheres are activated. So that's been another in-home experience. Well, and with the research we've done, everything you're saying supports that. Just so like your left and your right hemisphere, they just work together all the time unless that limbic system gets activated. And so you're right. We're just keeping that calm. So then your brain can just work the way it was meant to work. And so I love that because I'm sure law school, with your schooling, it's difficult. And so it's super hard, lots of reading, lots of testing. And I love that he's using that the whole way through. I think that's a really great story. Yeah. And I think in the realm of pain management, the story I told about my husband was extreme acute pain. Yes. I think there's a continuum. What my son was sharing was anxiety. you
Mm-hmm.
know, and difficulty concentrating over an extended period of time.
Sure.
And so that is still pain, if you will. And then I've done my own little experimentation with my clients and myself. And I say, because I work with so many athletes, I say,
Right.
hey, after you've really pushed and done an incredible workout or training, I want you to, while you're cleaning up or going to the next thing, put the Bi-Tapps on. But what I want you to do, and I've done this with myself, is I want you to pay attention to your pain and discomfort, because when you push it, you know, what we're doing is we're breaking down muscles to make them stronger, right?
Right.
And so, and you get really sore and everything. So I'll invite them to put the Bi-Tapps on post training. And what almost without exception is that they talk about feeling more grounded, and that the pain and the discomfort was shorter in duration and less intense. Now, what that means to me is their experience of it. They still had post-training pain.
Sure.
It still lasted a while, as it should, but it wasn't the level of discomfort that they were anticipating. And so again, I think it all ties into what we said about the brain. And I also think the vagus nerve,
Mm-hmm.
because when the parasympathetic system has more access and availability, then the vagus nerve is helping that. And so it's really these simple, what we think are these simple tapping things.
Yeah. So simple, right? But so
Right,
effective. Mm-hmm.
right,
I
right.
know they're using them. They're starting to allow them for people like your husband post surgery at home, but they're letting them people use them during delivery now. And then
Yep.
also, you know, just when they come out of surgery. And so everything you're saying, I think it's just taking that sympathetic activation and just calming it down naturally, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and I've definitely recommended to my clients that are going into surgery to use them pre and
Yeah.
post-op. And I've heard some
Yeah.
stories where they're actually, the doctors are super interested. Like, what are
Mhm.
those? What are they doing? Because obviously, if their patient is more grounded and
Right.
regulated, it's everything easier. And
Everything's
so,
easier. That's a good way to say
yeah,
it. Yeah.
so their job's easier too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been really interesting to hear their reports that the medical professionals are really interested. You know, what is that? What's that doing?
Well, and what I love is the science already backs it up. And so this is just a resource that actually just is a outgrowth of the science. And so
Right.
the other group that I know you're a rock star with is the first responders. And so I just wanted to just get your feedback, because we both know they're exposed to acute stress, chronic stress. It just affects a large part of their life, just that sympathetic activation continually. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just wanted to ask you, just because I know you do incredible work with first responders.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for the last few decades to work in that environment. And they're elite performers. So it's
Yeah.
really almost everything I've already said, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, the cumulative exposure to traumatic humanities problems and issues and tragedies really takes a toll. So, what I recommend is all the transitions on their way to work, on their way home. The big thing that we see in families of first responders is there's this window when they get home. It's really important for the family, but they're so burned out and they're
Right.
still thinking about the day, and they could be irritable, or they've got a pileup of stress and adrenaline and cortisol. And so I ask them to wear them on their way home. And so many spouses have said they come in the door more engaged,
Mm.
more grounded. You know, we're not going, okay, what kind of night is it going to be? Because we don't know how stressed out they are. So there's a more consistent reentry into the family, which is huge.
Huge.
And then when they're writing reports or after an incident where they did get elevated, which is totally normal, to go ahead and toss them on after the incident in between calls. Or firefighters have told me that when they get back to the station, you know, they've got to go to sleep. They're on 72-hour or longer shifts.
Mm.
And so they will put them in their socks, and they're consistently reporting going to sleep faster.
Good.
And then when they're having to wake up quickly,
Yeah.
they're not as like hyper vigilant,
Mhm.
and they can even wear them during a call. Most of the calls obviously are medical, and so they've often reported to me that they feel like they have better concentration, they're less distracted,
It makes sense.
and yeah, it all makes sense. And so the neat thing is when one first responder uses them, and then they tell another, and they tell another, and they tell another, and first responders love devices. And then when we're able to explain to them, what is this really doing for you? And it's really an energy efficiency regulator is how I see it. Because if you get pumped in a stressful situation, adrenaline, cortisol is getting dumped in the system. If you don't down regulate for a first responder, then you hit that next call at a higher, activated state.
Right.
So you want to reset, or I call it reboot, every time, every call.
Mm-hmm.
And also you want to be in that regulated state when a call comes out. And so it's been very useful. It makes sense to them, and they're not going to do anything that doesn't make sense to them. The science behind it makes a lot of sense. And the bottom line is, for any of these folks, when we feel better, that's when we say this works.
That's
even
true.
if we don't fully understand how it's working.
Well, and I've heard some of the first responders that I've worked with, or that they've tried the tappers, they're using them if they have to do an interview, whether they're the interviewee or the interviewer, just so that they do better. And they're also using them when they testify in court, because it's really important that they manage that anxiety so that prefrontal cortex, that thinking brain, can pull up the information that they need to. And then I love the part where you mentioned paperwork, because I've talked to some of them, and they just said the reason they have a hard time with the paperwork is they want to be efficient and get it done, but then they have to bring up an incident that might be really horrific. And so there's avoidance there. And so that's where I love how the tappers can just keep them regulated as they have to go through, really difficult, either it's pictures or scenes or just remembrances of a tragedy. And so that's how they're using them.
Cindy, what I've been curious about in just what you just said is when the first responders are using them after these incidents, I wonder if the memory consolidation of those critical incidents is improved because they're in that regulated state, which could influence whether subthreshold PTSD or PTSD develops later. I don't know. It might be just a wishful thinking, but it makes sense to me that when they're regulating quickly afterwards, or, I've had a lot of first responders with, sleep disruptions and, flashbacks and night terrors. And I just say, before bed, whether you think you need it or not, and then if you wake up, startled, or you're having a nightmare, grab the Bi-Tapps, put them back on, and see if you can just go to sleep. I had another situation this last week, a client in great health, really. I say, even though she's 73, you'd never know it. Marathon runner, just great attitude, great health. Just got diagnosed with ALS.
Oh,
and devastating. And when you start thinking about what's this going to be, what's it going to look like? I mean, she got so spun up with anxiety, totally understandable, right? And really was having a hard time getting out of that spin. It was almost like a vortex, right? And so I just handed her the Bi-Tapps. We put it on because I wanted her to talk about all her fears and whatever. And as within, again, a few minutes, you could see that she got out of that like spin that she was stuck in.
Just
and
naturally.
She was able, it was, and I sometimes will call it that ruminating spin. This was, much more intense, obviously. And then again, if we think about what's the brain doing with that information, if the brain is balancing itself and then it stores memory, I would think it's going to store it in a more effective place.
Well, it's part of what I think, and I just feels like rumination would be like a higher brain function, but then the tapping is hitting, like the sensing brain. So I just believe the sensing brain's the boss. And so then if we can regulate that, then it makes sense. Then everything will start to settle down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's beautiful. Can you think of any other uses or anything else you would like to share just about Bi-Tapp?
I think the communication piece, and again, kids teach us so much, right? So I was working with this mother and daughter. Daughter was about 12, and they were in lots of conflict. And so I would have them talk about whatever the issue was with both of them had their Bi-Tapps.
I love
Now,
that, Sarah.
I didn't start doing that. As a therapist, I was frustrated.
Sure.
I was using all my skills and nothing was getting these two out of this spin of a conflict that wasn't getting anywhere.
Right.
And I was trying everything. And I'll be
Right.
honest with you, I glanced over and I saw the Bi-Tapps in my office. I was like, I'm going to try something. Now, fortunately, I had two sets. One was mine in my purse, and the other was the one I use at the office.
Right.
And so I brought them both out.
I love
said,
that.
All right, I said, ladies, we're going to try this again, but let's put this on first. And I didn't give them any education. I was like, they are heated. They are in it. We're going to put these on. We're going to take 3 breaths and we're going to start over.
Good.
And it's like they started out the same. Okay, I said, you pick up where you left off, right? And it really opened up the communication. What I think it opened up really was the ability to listen.
Beautiful.
Because they weren't so, well, then they told me a story later that they were at home. And of course, they went and bought some Bi-Tapps, right?
Right.
And apparently the report cards came in. And before the daughter was going to show mom that she handed her the Bi-Tapps.
She's front loading her mom. Yeah.
She wanted mom to be regulated
Yeah.
and stay regulated because she had a reason why some of those grades weren't okay. But they laughed so much about it. They went, okay, we'll deal with this. What do we have to deal with? And so in the communication, and I've headed into some meetings.
Yeah.
And there are some intense things that were going to happen. I had to help people make some decisions, and I put my Bi-Tapps on so that I could stay in that zone, if you will, the whole time.
Regulated.
Right? Hopefully the whole time. Yeah. The other thing that's striking is the technology, because years ago there were other types of these kinds of things coming out, and they were really uncomfortable. And my staff, myself, we thought, oh, well, this was a good idea, but it's just not going to work because our clients and ourselves, we didn't like them. I've never heard a complaint, and I don't know what it is because I don't understand how you made these, but it's very soothing. It's a soothing pulse that even with highly sensitive people that we work with, or when somebody is acutely activated, they're sensitive. And sometimes you worry, oh, is this going to, make them feel worse? Never. I've never had it, people be uncomfortable with it.
I wonder if it's just because it feels more like a tap, because that, like tapping, feels more like tapping versus maybe
rather than like
else.
A buzz. Yeah.
Because that's part of when we were developing them, I just wanted it like if you didn't have tappers, then like you could tap, on the top of your thighs or something. Just wanted it to feel like that. And that was actually where Haley, who's the other founder, she just was so insistent, maybe it's because she's a mom, just that it needed to really feel calming and gentle and just soothing. And I think that's what the tapping does more than maybe other, I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Soothing's a good word.
Yeah.
And then when you do, you can put them on low and slow and just be in the background. And sometimes you just forget about them,
which is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. This has been wonderful to visit with you. And I just love all the ways you're using them and just your dedication to helping people. You're just a tremendous person.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for all the labor intensive time and effort that went into creating these.
Yeah. You're welcome.
It was a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah. So now we'll just talk. Maybe I don't know if I dare hit stop record. I don't think I dare. We'll just edit this part out.
You know, one other thing though is with everything that's going on in the world, I've had clients who, you know, obviously they want to watch the news, and, you know, it's not up to me whether people watch the news or not, or how much or whatever, but we talk about what's going on and how it's impacting them. And so I have actually more recently asked several of them, why don't you put the Bi-Tapp on when you watch the nightly news?
I think that's a great idea.
And again, it wasn't some masterful thinking. I was just watching them describe and what's going on around the world in certain circumstances to really hitting home for them.
Sure.
And I said, I'm not going to tell you not to watch the news, because I know you're going to watch.
Right.
And you're going to read, and you're going to just toss on those Bi-Tapps while you're doing that. And they looked at me and they go, I think that's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
It turns out it was a great idea because it had an effect. It helped them, you know, not get so amped up, not feel so helpless, you know, kind of manage their reaction a little bit better. And what else do we need? You know, we need to manage our reactions, because what's going on in our world externally, the difficult stuff, is still going to go on.
That's right.
Right. So we don't get to escape it, but we get to manage ourselves in it. And that's where I see, you know, organically, I like to say Bi-Tapps are just, you know, showing up, or people are putting them on, and my clients are telling me when they're using them.
I think that's that's how you know they've internalized that resource. Then.
Right.
Like, I like that story of the teenager, like she understood that it would help her mom be calmer. And so she knew to front load her mom that way.
Right.
No, that's good, Sarah. This is really good.